The other day, I heard a report on how kids are doing these days, and it made me wonder, are we gauging kids today by the same standard that we were gauged years ago? Do we kind of always just hope that teens are doing worse than we were? Sometimes I think the way we look, especially at kids and teens, can really put them in a dark place, and also as parents in places of fear. Well, today on the Celebrate Kids podcast, in this daily segment, Facing the Dark, Dr. Kathy kind of addresses this. Is it healthy for us to gauge kids today by a different standard than we were gauged when we were young? Dr. Kathy has some important insights, so let's turn to her now.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So, Dr. Kathy, over the past couple decades, high school graduation rates have really gone up. Fewer teens are also taking up smoking, and the birth rate amongst 15 to 19-year-olds is at a record low. Also, arrest rates for teens are dropping, and the total youth drug use is trending downwards. So by all measure, especially the measures of the 1990s when I was growing up, teens are doing really well. But there are teen reports that their own mental health is really spiraling out of control. Increasingly, they're anxious, depressed, wrestling with thoughts of suicide. The measures that researchers have traditionally used to gauge adolescent well-being have become sharply out of step with the reality of what adolescent life is actually like today. Have the goalposts of teens and teen success shifted? And is it good to highlight mental health versus something more tangible, like how we used to gauge things before, prior to the advent of the iPod and iPhone, on how teens are doing and what we should kind of say a teen is doing well and they're, in on a pathway for success? What are your thoughts here when you hear this?
Well, I'm fascinated. So first of all, praise the Lord for the good news about high school graduation rates and tobacco and the birth rate, arrest rates, drug use. That's really, really good news that's going well. And so it's intriguing, right? Because we do know in solid research that anxiety and stress and the suicidal tendency has gone up. So there's something else going on, right? I think our teens are overwhelmed by all the options, the desire for happiness, the need for their red carpet moment, the filters, the comparisons, the 24-hour-a-day potential bullying and awareness, the fear they might be left out or leave somebody out who's then offended that they've been left out of a text thread or a like on a photo somewhere. I think it's all real. And those kinds of things don't necessarily prevent them from graduating. I wonder what I do have bright kids not earning good grades because they've succumbed to comparisonitis and they've been defeated by that. So I'm intrigued. I wonder if instead of turning to drugs, I don't think alcohol was mentioned here. I think rather than turning to drugs and tobacco as their fix for depression, are they turning to screens? It's not illegal. Doesn't cost them anything if they already own it. And it doesn't look like they're doing anything bad. They can even maybe be looking at porn in the living room. So I wonder if the vice has changed.
And when we gauge then, teen mental health or teen health in general, is that a helpful benchmark to look at kind of time on screens, or is there something else with this? I've wrestled with this because it does feel like when I was growing up, none of these things were even, considered, mental health and all of that. It's easy to kind of say that it was a byproduct of technology's advancement with the iPod and the iPhone in the early 2000s and what that's kind of done now down the road. But is it helpful for us to hold to a standard of what was done in the past? Teens going out and getting a job and teens doing these other things. And then looking at the mental health thing as, that's just something to consider, but you guys are doing really well. Should we be celebrating teens more? Or is it to a point where we need to say, yeah, and you guys are all struggling with mental health? What are your thoughts there on that?
Yeah, it's a mess, right? I just was speaking to some college students and a girl asked the question, Dr. Kathy, what's your best advice for our generation? We're so broken. And I asked her to never define her whole generation as broken ever again, because that's a blanket statement that isn't true. You can have brokenness within a family unit. There are students that were probably in that class who feel broken from one thing or another, but it's dangerous for us to think and for them to think of an entire generation as being broken. So I think we're flippant. I think we're assumptive. And I think that makes it hard for a kid to be normal because my whole generation is broken. So I better find my brokenness so that I fit in. And that's dangerous. We could talk about that all day. So mental health needs to be talked about, but it needs to be worked on, not just talked about. We have to find ways to help if we really feel concern for someone. I also think that sadness is unfair expectations. Sadness, the middle school girls right now, epidemic of sadness, which we know can lead to horrific decisions. So why are they so sad? They're purposeless. They don't have their identity. I would be sad too if I didn't know who I was. I would be sad and depressed and suicidal if I didn't see that I fit in anywhere. I would question the need for my existence if I didn't think that I could solve the problems that I see in front of me on my screens and in person. So are we doing a good job as family members, educators, and church members to say to these young people, you have been created for such a time as this. Wait, you're coming together, you're learning some skills, you're getting some character, you're developing healthier beliefs, and there is a place where you're going to step out into your ability to conquer that which is broken. Wait for it.
Yeah, I think those are really helpful, encouraging steps that we can take with teens, and especially because, like you said before, it just feels like it's in vogue to just kind of blanket the whole teenage population with struggling mental health. What are some main ways then that we can kind of attack that as adults and as people that work with kids and as parents? Like you had that example of saying, don't ever have that blanket kind of cast over your entire generation. Are there other ways that we could talk about mental health to where it doesn't feel like it is just this, Eeyore moment where there's a rain cloud over us all the time for teens? I just feel like many teens are thinking, man, there is just so much depression around me. How can we kind of combat that with our kids?
The first thing I think of is that we better check ourselves, right? When's the last time we did a mental health check on us? Are we joyful or are we looking for happiness around every corner? Are we depressed or concerned? We throw depression, stress, and anxiety around, like they're non-words almost. And I get that they're real. There's a real chemical imbalance that can cause true anxiety that needs to be medicated, and that kid or that adult needs to be in some counseling and therapy. I totally get that. There's also other times when I think we just don't pull up our boots and go do what we need to do. And I don't say that lightly. A kid who's flunking needs to study. I've asked young people, how many of you have dropped a class after a first hard quiz? So picture yourself in college and the first quiz they did not do well on. And I said, how many of you dropped the course? I was shocked at the number of students who raised their hands. I don't know about you who are listening, but if I had a bad test score or quiz score, I studied more. I think I went to the professor or the teacher to say, I thought I understood it, but I clearly don't. What do you see that I'm missing? In today's generation are unfortunately cutting and running. And I think they've watched some of us do that. I think these are conversations we have to have. Are we healthy examples? Are we willing to show our struggle and how we've overcome it? Because our authority strengthens when we admit in vulnerability that we have struggled. Do we challenge them to step up to the plate and become who they have been created to be? Do we speak optimistic life into our kids? And if they truly are acting depressed, do we get them help? Do we get them into the sunshine? Do we find them a hobby? Do we build a jigsaw puzzle together so that you're not in your bedroom alone? Are you drinking enough water? Are you eating the right food? I mean, there's some really pretty simple things I think we can do that in some situations are going to make a world of difference. Oh, I hope so. Wait, it's so tricky, right? I don't want to come across as I don't believe it's real, but I don't think it's as real as, and I don't know about you, but if like you have daughters, if you ask, are you sad? I mean, what causes a middle school girl to say yes or no to that? Do they even know what sadness is? I'm fascinated by this whole study of research.
It feels hard to say it, but when Dr. Kathy was talking, it made me think of a passage out of Matthew chapter 7. I'm going to begin reading at verse 1. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, "Let me take that speck out of your eye," when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eyes. The way Dr. Kathy approaches this topic is really humbling, at least for me as a dad. That big question on, am I engaging or doing the things even that I kind of encourage my kids to do? I think taking a hot minute, taking a step back and assessing that question, honestly, maybe even to journal it or write down the answers, and then to talk to my kids about it in a different way. I've done that often with my daughter where I've said, if it's hard for you to talk about this topic, just write it down and then share that paper with me. What if we did that for our kids? What if we wrote down our challenging thoughts and our challenging moments and let them kind of read it? And let's walk through that point together. I think maybe doing that is going to shine a bright light on some dark places that our culture has cast, and even maybe we've cast inadvertently on our kids. I hope that gives hope to you and encouragement to you today. Step in and do the hard things. Face the dark times. I want to thank you for listening to this Celebrate Kids podcast. In this daily segment, Face in the Dark, Dr. Kathy is launching a new initiative. We're so excited about it. It's actually an online course where Dr. Kathy walks through kind of popular topics in a video format to give you some teaching. And then she does 2 Q&A sessions that are actually live online where you can ask Dr. Kathy kind of the things that are going on in your life. We're launching these new classes in March 1st, this Friday, and we want to invite you to sign up for them. You can do that by going to celebratekids.com/sign up. Just fill out that form quick and we'll shoot you an email when the course launches on Friday. We think that this is going to be an exciting time, an exciting new adventure for Dr. Kathy to walk hand in hand with a lot of parents, almost to have Dr. Kathy in your back pocket where you can be going through a study. This first one on curbing the complaining is going to be really dynamic. I've edited it. It's really fantastic. But what I don't have is your questions, and you get to submit those as you go through the class. So I encourage you, again, to sign up for that at celebratekids.com/sign up. Thanks for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast. My name's Wayne Stender. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, we're so glad you're listening, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again.